headlines. Korea's industrial output grows at the slowest pace since the year 2000 due to the effects of the 2014 April ferry disaster and strikes in the auto industry. South Korea and the U.S. are set to hold back-to-back senior-level talks this week. How to deal with future cyber attacks from North Korea rises as one of the key issues on the table. And bombings in North Sinai in Egypt kill at least 27 people, and the Islamic State's Egypt branch claims responsibility for the attack. Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News. Thanks for tuning in. I am Kang Chae-ri in Seoul. Korea's industrial output rose at its slowest pace ever last year as the domestic economy is still struggling to pick up a decent head of steam. Manufacturers' business sentiment also remains sluggish. Our Hwang Ji-hye has more.
Korea posted the worst output growth last year. Statistics Korea says the country's output across all industries went up a mere 1.1% in 2014 from a year earlier. That marks the slowest pace of growth since the year 2000 when the agency started to compile related data. The agency attributed the sluggish growth to an overall downturn last year as the economy was hit hard by the Seoul ferry disaster and partial strikes in the auto industry. By sector, output in mining and manufacturing remained unchanged from the previous year, while service sector output rose 2.2%. Facility investment, however, jumped more than 4.5% on the back of strong investments in auto and machinery sectors. December's industrial output also rose almost 1% from a month ago after auto workers ended their strikes and factories normalized operations. Still, experts say it's hard to interpret last month's uptick as a recovery sign, as the improvement is largely because of a low base caused by the strikes. Such gloomy economic data is directly reflected in how businesses are seeing the economic conditions. The Bank of Korea says its manufacturers' business sentiment index for this month came in at 73, unchanged from a month earlier. A reading under 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Korea's central bank has hinted that it's not cutting interest rates anytime soon, although the country's inflation rate is expected to stay well below the target band. And as our Kim Min-ji tells us, in the face of ballooning household debt here in the country, the bank says a rate cut would do more harm than good.
The Bank of Korea says it will not cut interest rates simply because the nation is expected to have low inflation. In its semi-annual report, the central bank made clear that it will take into account growing household debt and other negative side effects before implementing any expansionary monetary policies. The country's inflation rate is expected to fall below the bank's target band of 2.5 to 3.5% this year, but the report suggests it doesn't justify a rate cut. That's because a slump in crude and agricultural prices, not a drop in demand, were the main culprits that lowered consumer prices to 1.2% in the second half of last year. The bank also brushed aside concerns that low inflation may herald a long period of economic stagnation for the country, saying a rate cut could pose a threat to financial stability. With the country's runaway household debt hitting around $920 billion, economists warn that a further rise in the debt level could sap consumers of their spending power. The central bank's base rate is already hovering at 2%, a level not seen since the height of the global financial crisis. It cut its base rate twice in the second half of last year, in line with the government's efforts to boost the weak domestic economy. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
China was the #1 target for foreign direct investment last year, topping the U.S. for the first time in more than a decade. The country's steady growth has been cited as the main reason, along with a general trend toward developing economies. Our Kwon So-ah reports.
China became the top destination for foreign direct investment last year, according to the latest report by the UN Conference on Trade and Development. This is the first time it's topped the United States since 2003. Foreign businesses invested over $127 billion into China last year, a $3 billion rise from the previous year. The U.S., on the other hand, saw investments plunge to $86 billion from over $230 in 2013. That put the U.S. in third behind China and Hong Kong, followed by Singapore, Brazil, and the U.K. The U.S. was the only developed country in the top 5. The UN Conference's Director of Investment and Enterprise, James Zahn, says China's performance is attributed to its steady economic growth. He added there have been changes in the investment areas from manufacturing toward the service sector and from labor-intensive fields to tech-intensive ones. And investors are generally shifting away from developed economies to developing ones, with foreign direct investment in developing economies having doubled since the 2008 global financial crisis. Asia alone has accounted for 15% of the inflow last year, the highest amount ever. Although Korea's FDI inflow has been among the bottom 7 out of 8 Asian countries for 6 years, Korea ranked 4th out of 177 countries for foreign direct investment potential in a separate UNCTAD report. Also, the FDI amount pledged to Korea last year reached a record high of $19 billion due to recently signed free trade agreements. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Fewer travelers are passing through Korea's main gateway than before. According to the Incheon International Airport Corporation Friday, the number of passengers transferring at this airport dropped 6% last year to 7 million, which is 460,000 less than 2013. The company cited a lower number of Chinese and Japanese passengers passing through Incheon to this decline, with more direct flights out of these countries. Duty-free shops at Korea's Incheon International Airport are doing pretty well, thanks to Chinese tourists spending some big bucks there. Seeing an opportunity, Korean companies are vying for a slice of that pie. Our Hwang Ji-hye tells us more.
Businesses are in a bidding war to open a duty-free shop at Incheon International Airport. The 14 bidders this year include conglomerates such as Lotte, Silla, and Shinsegae, and smaller licensees like Dongwha. Duty-free shops have seen their sales jump by an average of 10% a year over the past 5 years. The sales volume of the duty-free shops at the Incheon International Airport was among the largest worldwide. The shops at Incheon seem to have a bright future, largely thanks to the increase in the number of Chinese tourists visiting the country, as their spending comprises 35% of total sales at the shops. The airport was named the world's best duty-free shops in a business traveler survey of Chinese tourists in 2014. But the appeal of opening a shop at Incheon cannot be expressed in numbers only. Companies are using the know-how they've gained at the airport to expand their business overseas. For example, Lotte reported sales of $3.8 billion last year at duty-free shops in airports and cities around the world, including Japan's Kansai Airport and Guam Airport. That's a 6-fold increase from 2000. The Incheon International Airport Corporation says it will finalize which businesses win this year's round of bidding by February 18th. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
South Korea and the United States are holding back-to-back senior-level talks this week. A senior U.S. delegation was in Seoul for disarmament talks, and dealing with future cyber attacks coming from North Korea was one of the key issues discussed. Our Hwang Ji-hye tells us more.
U.S. Undersecretary of State Rose Gottemoeller says North Korea's cyber attack on Sony Pictures last year has brought Seoul and Washington even closer together, extending their strong alliance to the area of cybersecurity.
There was no daylight between the Republic of Korea and the United States in how we dealt with this issue, and both of our presidents, President Park and President Obama, feel that this is an enormously important area where we must be joined very closely together in how we address cyber threats.
The U.S. diplomat was in Seoul Friday for discussions on disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation issues. When asked whether President Barack Obama's comment about the collapse of North Korea was part of U.S. retaliation against future cyber attacks, she said the new executive order reflects the president's commitment. President Obama said in a recent YouTube interview that the spread of information via the internet will eventually lead the North Korean regime to collapse.
I think the fact that we have a new executive order that's devoted to this, it really shows how committed the president is to paying intense attention when these problems arise.
South Korea and the U.S. are planning to hold a round of annual cybersecurity talks in Washington in the coming months, which will be their first such meeting since last February. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
In the beginning of this year, the two Koreas seemed much more eager and willing to talk to each other, but things turned cold when North Korea virtually rejected South Korea's offer for talks, giving Seoul a set of preconditions. Now, our Connie Kim spoke to some experts to hear what they see in terms of inter-Korean talks in the coming months.
Since South Korea proposed high-level talks with the North late last month, the two Koreas have been unable to narrow their differences over a set of preconditions laid out by Pyongyang. Experts say that while the momentum for dialogue appears to have been lost, they're optimistic that talks could eventually resume, given policy goals in Seoul and Pyongyang. On the South Korean side, President Park Geunhyes wants to see progress in her trust-building process as she enters her third year in office. And North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, in his fourth year in power, wants to ease the economic hardship in the country by ending its diplomatic isolation. Experts also say, however, that both sides may have to wait until after a round of military drills between Korea and the U.S., scheduled for March, a halt to which was on Pyongyang's set of preconditions.
I would not expect any serious talks during the drills. Indeed, once it begins, everything will be frozen for a while. If nothing is heard until the beginning of these exercises, it means that the situation is likely to remain frozen. But, well, maybe even in this case there will be more contacts after the exercises end.
Others suggest the talks could occur even before the drills.
The North will ramp up pressure on the South until mid-February, but could then propose inter-Korean military talks to seek the scaling down of the drills or other political gains.
Pyongyang has long used inter-Korean talks when it wants to break out of its diplomatic isolation. Underlining its efforts to mend ties with the outside world, Kim Jong-un has reportedly accepted Russia's invitation to visit Moscow in May for an anniversary of its victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. There's also speculation Kim might head to Indonesia to attend the Bandung Conference of non-aligned Asian and African countries in April. Kim's grandfather and the regime's founder, Kim Il-sung, attended this event back in 1965, and the younger Kim has a track record of modeling himself after his grandfather. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Yesterday, we told you about former President Lee Myung-bak's shocking revelation about North Korea's offer for talks in exchange for aid. Today, the presidential office of Cheong Wa Dae called this revelation appalling. Anonymous Cheong Wa Dae official questioned how detailing accounts of past foreign affairs, including inter-Korean dialogue, would promote national interest. This official also said the current Park Geunhyes administration believes in transparency when carrying out its foreign policies. In his new book, former President Lee revealed that while he was in office, North Korea repeatedly demanded various forms of aid from the South in return for a leaders' summit and an apology for torpedoing a South Korean warship 5 years ago. It's been going down and now reaching new lows. Gallup Korea says just 29% of roughly 1,000 Koreans gave President Park Geunhye good marks on how she's running the country. That's down by a percentage point from a week earlier. It's the first time President Park's approval ratings have dropped into the 20% range since she took office nearly 2 years ago. 63% of respondents said they were not satisfied with the president's running. The most cited reasons included lack of communication, the controversial tax policy revisions, and the president's failed personnel picks. The Australian embassy here in Seoul celebrated the country's biggest holiday, Australia Day, with a very special event filled with lots of food and culture. Our Connie Lee takes us there.
Fresh, plump cherries, mangoes as large as your face, and deep red wine. These are just a few of the things that are here in Korea, straight from Australia. Celebrating Australia Day under the theme of Showcasing Australia, the nation's embassy in Seoul held a gala event to highlight all the things the nation has to offer to Korea as a key trade and investment partner. With the Korea-Australia Free Trade Agreement in full effect since December 2014, there are certain items from the land down under that are now cheaper here in Seoul. For instance, these cherries. The removal of the 24% tariff has made these fruits much more affordable to Korean consumers. Likewise for Australian wine.
I'm a lover of wine. It's a personal interest of mine. So I think with the tariff on wine coming down with the free trade agreement, I hope to see more range of choice of Australian wine in the market.
The Australian ambassador adds that he wants to stimulate new areas of trade this year and maintain his country's strong defense relationship with Korea.
We put a big emphasis on our defence relationship. Australia is very much an Asia-Pacific country, so peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula is central to our economic health.
The event also included a special performance by Korean-Australian pop singer Tommy Im, the 2013 winner of the singing show X Factor Australia.
I do want to come back to Korea this year, and if I get the opportunity, I want to do my own concert and, actually get to meet my fans and spend a bit more time here.
Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And speaking of, South Korea and Australia will go head-to-head on Saturday in Sydney in a battle to win the Asian Cup title. Korea has already beaten Australia in the tournament and has a perfect defensive record, but the Korean team will have to cope with tens of thousands of Aussies cheering on their team. Our SJ Lee gives us a preview of the big match.
5 matches, 5 wins, and not a single goal conceded. Expectations weren't high at the start, but now the South Korean national football team is on the brink of winning its first Asian Cup title in 55 years. But with Australia playing in front of their home crowd, it won't be an easy task, as the Socceroos are looking to win their first ever Asian Cup title. It's a battle between the tournament's best defensive team in Korea, who have yet to give up a single goal, and an Australian team that have scored the most goals with 12, with 10 different players finding the back of the net. And while the Taeguk Warriors beat the Socceroos 1-0 in their opening group stage match, most analysts expect the home team will push forward aggressively and try to break through the South Korean defense early on. The final carries extra weight as the winner also qualifies for the 2017 Confederation Cup in Russia. The Asian Cup final between South Korea and Australia kicks off in Sydney on Saturday at 6 p.m. Korea time. SJ Lee, ARIRANG News.
The Thursday deadline imposed by Islamic State militants has come and gone with no prisoner swap. And to tell us more about this story and others, Paul Yi is joining us from the News Center. Paul, so has there been any word from this extremist group regarding the 2 hostages that they threatened to kill at sunset?
Well, there's been no announcement or new message released, at least publicly. Jordan chose not to release the Iraqi suicide bomber as demanded by IS, saying it is still waiting for proof that the captured Jordanian fighter pilot is alive and well. The Turkish border gate where the swap deal was to take place was calm on this Friday morning, and it remains unclear what happened to either the Japanese hostage or the young pilot Muaith al-Qusaybe. Meanwhile, people on the streets of Tokyo casted doubt on the possible prisoner exchange, with many losing hope for their fellow countrymen.
I'm still not sure whether the swap between the hostage and the death row convict is justifiable. It means we're putting back the criminal in our society. I don't know if such a thing can be justified under the plea of saving a human life.
I fully feel for the wife who said she wants her husband back immediately. I hope that her wish will be realized soon.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says his government is working closely with Jordan and other countries to secure the release of Kenji Goto, who was captured in Syria last year. Addressing a parliamentary panel on Friday, Abe said every effort was being made to determine the fate of the Japanese journalist.
Certainly a very difficult and complicated situation there. Now let's shift to a deadly attack in Egypt now. A series of bombings targeting a military base in the northern part of the country killed at least 27 people, and this mostly soldiers. Give us the details.
Well, Egyptian officials say this violent siege took place in the town of Al-Arish in the North Sinai Peninsula on Thursday at local time. Militants detonated a car bomb and fired mortar rounds at a hotel, a police club, and several security checkpoints. A flagship government newspaper reported that its Al-Arish office, located near that military base, had been completely destroyed. The Islamic State's Egypt branch has claimed responsibility for this attack. An army general, or major that is, was also later shot dead at a checkpoint in the border town of Rafah.
And turning to the United States, health officials there are warning that the recent outbreak of measles has now spread across 14 different states, with scores of cases being reported in the last few weeks. How bad is this outbreak?
Well, it's undeniably the worst of its kind in 2 decades, and it also marks the return of the highly contagious disease since the country was declared measles-free in 2000. The latest public health alert came out of Arizona, where authorities there said 1,000 people may have been exposed to measles ahead of this weekend's Super Bowl. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention suspects the outbreak began last month at a Disneyland theme park in California. Over 90 cases have been confirmed so far, with many of the patients found to have opted out of the measles vaccine due to non-medical reasons. Dr. Ann Shu-chat, a director at the CDC, said it was a wake-up call for Americans, while partly blaming this latest outbreak on the so-called anti-vaccination movement.
And finally, the CEO of McDonald's has stepped down in the wake of this company's worst financial year in decades. So it's been struggling quite a bit with a string of scandals and growing competition. Do tell us some of the details of this sudden shakeup.
Well, Chief Executive Officer Don Thompson tendered his resignation on Wednesday. He'll be leaving at the end of February and will be succeeded by McDonald's Chief Brand Officer Steve Easterbrook. The change in leadership comes as the world's largest fast food chain posted a $300 million drop in earnings in the fourth quarter from a year earlier. The weak performance is being blamed on a constantly expanding menu and a lack of clear direction for the global company, that is.
We see a lot of the younger demographic, the millennials, really looking for brands that they understand. They want to know where their food is coming from. They may want it to be local or at least regional. They want to get a sense of the healthfulness of the food. And McDonald's really hasn't stayed relevant with that newer customer.
Experts say the Golden Arches are facing an identity crisis as it tries to become a trendier restaurant chain with healthier alternatives while moving away from its traditional focus on sheer volume and value. Investors do hope that Easterbrook will use his expertise in marketing to help streamline and revitalize this iconic brand. Charity?
Certainly keeping an eye out on him. All right, Paul, thank you so much, and let's leave it there for now, but we will see you back here in just about 2 hours.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather forecast. At the moment, we are under clear skies nationwide with strong cold winds blowing in some places, and numbers are set to take a dip tomorrow, and we will start off the Saturday morning at -7 degrees, so make sure to bundle up when heading out. Well, bright, clear skies will greet most regions, but there is a slim chance of snow or rainfall for Gyeongsangbuk-do province in the afternoon. Other than that, a cold wave watch has been issued for Gangwon-do province, and wind chills nationwide will make conditions feel a bit colder than the actual numbers. Looking ahead, after tomorrow's cold snap, moderate winter weather awaits us next week. On to Saturday's readings. The daytime high here in Seoul hits 1, Gwangju 3, Busan reaches 6. Meanwhile, Jeju reaches a high of 5, Dokdo hits 1, Mount Kumgang dips to -9. Those are the updates I have for you now. Hope you have a wonderful Friday evening.
Thank you very much, Bo Young, and that will do it for this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching.